Hello, everyone who's joining right now and probably wondering why we are all quiet. We're just waiting for everyone to join in before we start. So let's give just a minute or so before we can start the discussion. I hope you can hear us light and clear. Thank you. Just a couple of moments. All right, I think it's more than enough to wait. People are still joining in and they will be joining in soon, so that's fine. We can start. Welcome, everyone. My name is Aftab Siddiqui. I'm part of the MANRS project team. So thank you for joining this session. Today is the last day of the RPKI week. We organize with the help of our partners, partners like RIRs, APNIC, EFRINIC, AREN, RIPE-NCC, and LACNIC, and NSRC and NLNet Labs. We couldn't have done it without their support. So thank you so much for them. So today we have some of the distinguished guests on the panel. They will be sharing, not me, they will be sharing about the journey of RPKI and how they did it. So you will hear from them. So let me introduce you to our very dear friend, Dr. Philip Smith, who will be moderating the panel. And then we have Dwayne Saunders, who's the Senior Technology Specialist from Telstra, Australia. We have Tony Tauber from Comcast. He's a distinguished engineer. And then Mark Tinka, who's the Head of Engineering at Seacom. So that's all from my end. I'll just hand it over to Dr. Philip to take it over from there. Dr. Philip.
All right, thank you very much, Aftab, and good morning and good afternoon, good evening to everybody, wherever you are on the globe and watching this panel discussion. So pretty much like Aftab, I'm going to try and stay out of the way as much as I can, apart from prompting our distinguished panel members just to talk through some of the discussion points that we've prepared for all of you to listen to on this webinar. So the first question really that I would like our panelists to address is this one. How was your journey to implementing route origin validation? So just a bit of a background about how you got there, how you ended up doing route origin validation and your experiences in getting there. Tony, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks. Everyone can hear me okay? Should assume. So I was thinking that that maybe the question would be, what was our journey to implementing RPKI? And of course, I separate them into the validation, which I think of as the reading aspect, and then there's the publication, which is the writing aspect, publishing ROAS. And there really are two separate things. And for my part, I thought about them separately. You don't have to do one to do the other at all. But so setting aside the publishing part for now, the validation for us was we have our network structure is a backbone network with a number of regional networks, which get transit from the backbone to reach most places, but there are some regional interconnections and so forth. And the address space is split up among all of them, but that's not for this part. So the way we started it was, let's work on validation at the backbone edge, selecting a subset of providers at a time. And I felt that was the best way to do kind of an incremental rollout, manage the risk to the network of any ill results. And so I figured I would roll it out to the backbone edge, selecting a few sort of partner volunteers to start with, and then gradually grow from there, and then move to implementing it at the regional interconnection edge. So that was the basic breakdown for us.
Dwayne, how about your journey?
Yeah, so for Telstra, it's been a long journey. First discussions, I think, were about four and a half years ago. We were looking at the journey to get this actually rolled out and deployed. We're very similar in the way that it was rolled out, but we had some complications in regards to hardware versions. We had to get up to certain specs before we could even get to a point of rolling out and actually contacting customers to actually start being able to operate ROV. So as Tony mentioned, two separate processes versus creating ROAs and publishing those. I think we're about 12 months ahead publishing our ROAs before we actually rolled out ROV. That ROV for us, again, we started in our domestic network in Australia, and then started rolling out to select customers, select peers, before rolling out globally. Globally, when I say globally, that's our domestic network. At the same time, we were still having hardware and software version issues within our global network, which is AS4637. They're still on the journey to actually have it deployed everywhere. We've still got a couple of boxes here and there to actually get done. But again, it was the same process, selected peers, having a look at those interconnects, determining how or what we were seeing on those interfaces, and then determining a time period that we're giving customers before we're actually saying, hey, you have to have this fixed if you're sending us invalids. But yeah, it's been a long journey to get there, but we're there now.
Mark, what about your journey?
Yeah, we've been at it for a long time here at Seacom. I think Randy had began leading a lot of the charge in developing the spec from, I think, 2011, 2012-ish. So I think it was APNIC 36 actually, which was in Xi'an City, I might be mistaken, where we sort of took a bit of a poll. I think I might remember actually having chaired a panel on asking about RPKI and what people thought, just to understand if it was worth deploying. Anyway, so we initially deployed it in 2014 at Seacom. I think the only relying party software at the time was the one Randy had done with Rob Austin. I think the RPKI.NET toolkit, which was both a CA and a relying party software validator. And we actually began dropping invalids in 2014, but that didn't last very long because nobody else understood what we were trying to do. So it was difficult to explain to customers why they were seeing some routes here and not other routes there if they were multi-homed. And then it didn't help that we had a lot of code issues at the time on the Cisco's those days. And there was a bit of device crashing. There was a bit of policy being done automatically by Cisco that we weren't happy with. So we disabled it about 2 months later and spent the next, 12 months or so fixing code with Cisco. And then we re-enabled it in 2019 after we finally got, I think, Liquid and Work Online to join the party in Africa. So, and then obviously RPKI.net died and other RP software came along, but it's been a long time and it seems so long ago, but thankfully we are somewhere where it's now reasonably usable right now. So that's been good.
Yeah, I think we'll come back and have a look at the relying party software, and we probably should venture into some of the code issues as well, if they can be talked about here. But before we do that, what were your experiences? I mean, what, for informing customers about, tools that you have just to really monitor the status of ROV itself? I mean, did you produce your own tools, or are there public tools available, or what do you use? Mark, do you want to carry on?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, I mean, initially we were using, we didn't develop any in-house tools. So we obviously relied on the software itself, trying to tell the truth. We also relied on what I think others had been doing. I think Hurricane Electric
Mark has paused.
Well,
if you carry on.
Yeah. So, well, for us, I guess in terms of public vantage points, Hurricane Electric's excellent BGP tools help show some things about status of RPKI signing of a given prefix, or if you look at an AS, all their announced prefixes. So you can start to look at that, get an idea of where things stand. Also, and the RIPE validator, RIPE had a public page, which was the public instance of their validator software, which had a good user interface to, I mean, it still exists, to look at ROAs and also BGP announcements and whether they were valid, or what their status is. The other tool that I found helpful was Job Snyder's, who is a big booster of RPKI, as people may know, made some open source software available that he called OV Checker. That's what it's called. So if you look for on GitHub, OV-Checker, it takes basically, it allows you to take a dump of your BGP table, run it through this tool. I think it only works for v4 at this point. And then it will also take give it a JSON output of a validator, and it will take the BGP table, match it against the RPKI, info, and tell you in your BGP table what's valid, what's invalid. And for things that are invalid, it will tell you whether there's a valid covering route or not, because you wanted to see, like, okay, is there going to be an unreachable situation if you start dropping this route or that route? And that refinement was, I thought, quite helpful to sort of start getting thoughts together about, like, okay, how many pure unreachable networks are there, in our table, and so forth. So that was helpful.
Dwayne, what about your case with tools to monitor what's going on?
Yeah, very, very similar, using HE. We were also using the right dashboards, etc. We've started using a bit of the Cloudflare dashboards at the moment in regards to those things. A lot of our stuff was all manual in regards to checking interfaces and what routes, etc. And I think that was purely the OV tool come out, either we were just developing developing our own sort of scripts to check a few bits and pieces that we were happy with just during or just before that actually was released. So we never actually got around to using it. It's actually still sitting in things to can actually sit on just to keep a continuous look. We've also got, outside of the ROV stuff, we've also got external tools monitoring our own rowers ourselves for all of our prefixes, checking for invalids, expiry, etc. That it sees around the place. Again, I think Job was another one that did BGP alerter. I'm playing with that at the moment. We're using a commercial tool and have been for other things that had these functions in at the moment. But yeah, I'm currently looking at actually cutting over and using the BGP alerter stuff specifically for my rowers.
Okay, thanks. And Mark, before your fiber gave up on you, I think you were mid-sentence, so I'll give you an opportunity to finish what you were saying.
Yeah, I'm on my 4G. I hope it's stable, but I don't know if it will be. But yeah, so no, similar to what the rest of the guys have been saying, right? HE, who else? The validators themselves, obviously. And yeah, and also what the IRRs had put out there to monitor. So very similar to what everybody else has said. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're probably going to move on to one of our favorite topics, the validators themselves. So the relying party software, I mean, what did you end up using? And how did, and you know, when you ended up with what you're using, how did you evaluate what was best for you? Tony, do you want to start?
Sure. So that was actually was and somewhat continues to be a area of concern and interest. So initially there was the right validator. Well, there was the RPKI.net that Mark alluded to. That was, I think, the first implementation of. I mean, it has relying party, but it also has CA functions in it. I started to play around with that, you know, some years ago, and then it seemed that there was kind of the support for it had dried up, and I think the funding of it, a lot of it was grant funded for Rob Austin to develop it, and I don't know that there was at that, you know, several years ago ongoing funding for it, so it seemed also not very user friendly. So what came after that was Right Validator, which was was written in Java. The other, I think, was written in C and some other things. There's generally always some C under the hood, it seems. But the Java one was pretty good, Right Validator, but it had a nice user interface, web interface, but because it was Java, you know, it had some stability issues and some memory allocation things. But we still used it and are actually just in the process of departing from that. And the other one that we're using is Routenator from NLNet Labs that we've been pretty happy with as well. But there's a few other packages. So we're moving off Right Validator because it's been declared end of life by RIPE NCC. And we're now moving. So we have two. I decided to go with two different implementations. Sorry, I should back up and say what I decided to do for the design of the relying party thing was two different software implementations to get that software diversity, and then in two different data centers. So we get the geographic diversity of and, you know, kind of failure reliability zone diversity, if you will, so that if there was an outage of one data center, we'd still have two instances that routers could reach for information. And if one of the implementations had a problem, we could just shut down two and still have two diverse instances. So basically I ended up with Right Validator and Routenator 2 of each. But now we're moving to using RPKI clients, and there's a web wrapper that someone wrote from NCC, RIPE NCC, and that coupled, because that doesn't do the RTR part that feeds the routers. There's a Go RTR developed by Cloudflare, and that's what we're using, coupled with RPKI client to get the info to them. So sorry, that's very long-winded, and there's a few other options that people probably are aware of, but that's what we use.
Yeah, and while you're still on this, Tony, how did you make those choices, or was it just this is what was available?
Well, so we tried to get a look at what the support model seemed to be. Also, both RIPE's version and Routinator have published metrics that can be consumed by Prometheus, and you can make a dashboard with graphs to see, like, okay, what's the change over time and so forth. And that was appealing to us. And the one that we're moving to, RPKI client, doesn't have that, but with this web wrapper, for a person who I don't know if you pronounce it, Thies de Cook is a Dutch guy out of RIPE NCC, but he makes basically the metrics to get consumed, so we can still have that function even with RPKI client. So those were some of the factors. Also, like, what did the maintenance seem to be, and so forth. But other people probably have similar things that they looked at.
Yeah, Dwayne, what about your choice of validator, and how did you end up there?
So for us, again, it was very, very similar to Tony's process. We evaluated at the time RIPE NCC and Routinator, and at the time we went down the RIPE NCC purely for the metrics that we could pull out of it, as well as the web GUI over the top of Routinator, with the plan that we were going to be looking at using Routinator when our third tertiary site, physical geographic site, came up to be able to actually run diverse software. So we were going to actually run or look at running 2 sites with RIPE NCC and 1 with Routinator, which sort of came in handy because we had been playing with Routinator when RIPE NCC announced their end of support for that. So it was a fairly easy process for us just to jump straight into Routinator. We deployed that over the top of the RIPE software 4 months ago. Since then, there has been plans. AI Client and Okta are all sitting on the list of stuff to actually come back and actually evaluate, so that we have that secondary, or if we ever need to have a rapid deployment of a different software vendor. For Telstra, we manage 2 disparate networks with Telstra Global and Telstra Domestic. So we run completely separate relaying software in both networks for both network routers to actually, so it's not a shared infrastructure. I'd love to get to a point of being able to actually build it up and have geographical diverse outside of the country and all the rest of it. Still some internal work there that needs to be done with that. But yeah, again, a lot of it came down to what metrics can be pulled out of it for our operations staff to actually run around that. And that's the end result of where we've ended up today.
Okay. Mark, how about you?
Yeah.
Mr. Validator Checker.
There was no scientific method in choosing a validator. We just went with what was available at the time. 2014, it was only Dragon Labs, the RPKI.net, so we used that. It got more and more difficult to maintain on FreeBSD, I think, till about 2017. I think we dropped it in 2018, when I think Rob was building it mostly for Linux, and then he just gave up altogether. So after that, I think next for us was the RIPE one. We started off with the RIPE version 2, which was massively heavy, but it worked. We had to get a lot of CPU resources and memory to make that thing go. And then they introduced RIPE 3. RIPE 3 was significantly much more disorganized than RIPE 2 in our view. So we just skipped it all together and stayed on RIPE 2 for quite some time. Until I think laziness eventually disappeared and we found some time to go with something more current. So over the last, I think, 2-3 months, I've been testing quite a host of them, Routinator, as well as Fort, as well as RPKI client plus Stay RTR, which follows the same philosophy as Octo RPKI and Go RTR. And I think we're finally settling on Fort and RPKI client plus Stay RTR together, because there seem to be a number of issues with Routinator that I was talking to Yob about, and him and the Routinator CEO at NLNet Labs have been going at it about a number of issues. So there's some security concerns and implementation concerns about how Routinator is designed, which I'm also taking a look at more closely. So we're sort of settling between Fort and RPKI client with Stay RTR. So Fort itself has had a few issues in the last 2 weeks. We've been fighting a lot of bugs regarding scaling, especially. So they've had to rewrite the code for us. We've been testing that in the last 2 days. It's up and running for 2 days and 20 hours. So almost 3 days with no drama. That's great for 500 plus clients, which is very good. The RPKI client, which is in FreeBSD as a port, is great because it doesn't run as a daemon. It runs, in the pipeline as a binary. So you're not running it as a service, which is quite nice also. Stay RTR runs as a daemon and it's very small, very light. And because it's detached, you don't run into issues where the whole thing can bring the RTR session crashing down. If it's just a problem with the validator or vice versa. So the separation of the two is actually quite handy. There is actually a website, I'm not sure if it's publicly known, I'll probably just share it here, that tracks the key relying party software out there. So this might be nice to have because it does remain reasonably current, as you can see. And from what I can see here, it seems like the Cloudflare ones might suffer from a lack of support because it seems the very gracious dude that was maintaining it has since left Cloudflare, so it's not maintaining it anymore. But this is a nice website to have. It seems to be reasonably well maintained, so I definitely recommend keeping an eye on this one. So these are the two I'm using, the RPKI client plus RTR, as well as the regarding Fort oriented well, I think I'll spend time on it. Might go to get this URL with a couple of buttons to see if they run the same problems. We have the real performance with it, as he mentioned, with the 0.9 version. It was really able and really solid, but the other issues he raised are a bit of a concern that it seems NLab haven't yet addressed. So that's been our journey in that respect.
All right, thanks, Mark. You broke up a little bit in the middle of that, but I think it might just be your screen share, but I hope most folks managed to make that out. I mean, while we were talking about, oh, Mark's just disappeared. So, I mean, we were just talking about that is just, with the validator software, and, Mark had mentioned issues about, some of the router implementations having issues as well. I just want to sort of detour slightly. Tony or Dwayne, did you have issues with your router vendors and trying to get the RTR stuff to behave properly, or to get the router to behave properly doing ROV?
Yeah, so we ran into a few bugs here and there, which was expected, but we were doing hardware and software upgrades to get to a point that we could actually minimize those bugs and issues. We still run into those today. A good one that caught us just recently was between software versions, implicit RPKI, ROV on versus not. And we did a software upgrade, everything's sitting there, but hey, we missed the command to actually implicitly turn it on, where the last version it was on by default. So that showed up in Jeff's graphs of us no longer doing RPKI, ROV, because it was basically the router that they were connected to grab those stats. So yeah, so we've had a few little bits and pieces here and there, but nothing overly major that's caused a great deal of grief.
Okay, what about you, Tony?
I guess being not the earliest deployer has helped us. So by the time we were really getting to move ahead with our deployment in 2019 and 2020, the router vendors had pretty good, had solved a lot of the early issues, and we were dealing with code that, where they could say, okay, move to this code and it solves this bug and that bug. I would say, I don't want to tempt fate, and I think also there are some still outstanding bugs that, could happen under certain conditions, but so far, so good. We didn't have any big issues, because that would definitely be a showstopper. I think from the sort of product point of view, the uptime is definitely something that's more important than the verifiability of the routing, which probably everyone here knows is a rare issue compared to, we can't have routers crashing all the time. The decision if it's going to crash a router on any kind of ongoing basis would be just to disable it, because it's considered a bit of a nice to have. But yeah, so far so good. We haven't we've upgraded to the sort of fixed versions, and it hasn't caused a lot of problems for us.
All right, yeah. Mark, do you have any more war story? Oh, sorry, Dwayne.
I was just going to say, I'll add to Tony's, because I had a comment there as well. So one of the things I forgot to mention earlier was exactly what Tony was talking about in regards to deploying ROV and causing problems in the network. That was would have been one of our biggest hurdles with our management in regards to convincing them that the extra load, any of the bugs weren't going to cause too much of an impact. And the fail open model is, if RPKI fails totally, we're not going to impact traffic. And that was just something that right in the early days and getting through before we could even take those next steps to get through to management, that took a lot of convincing to actually move the actual project forward.
Okay. Mark, do you have any more war stories you want to share about router software talking with validators, or just router software behaving properly or improperly around validation?
Yeah, the router crashing was mostly between 2014 and 16. So that mostly got solved on Cisco. So those don't crash anymore. But recently, no, it's been reasonably stable, if I'm honest. And I think the only issue we ran into just a few days ago was Cloudflare running this little service where they test the ISPs that either have or don't have validation enabled for dropping invalids. And one of our customers said that we didn't pass. So when I had a sniff, it seemed like one of our peering routers in Durban was letting through the IPv6 route, but not the IPv4 one. The IPv4 one was being dropped, but the V6 one wasn't. And the policies were the same, except for being V4 and V6. Didn't understand what that was. So we just bumped the session and boom, it worked again. But that's an ASR 1002 box. So I'm not sure if it's the box or something else funny. But otherwise, the rest of it has been pretty solid. Since we moved to RIPE and then now Routinator, Fort, and Stay RTR, no drama, really.
We thank you for being the guinea pig in those early years. QA department.
Anytime.
It has been very interesting because, it's, as Mark knows, we've done a few of these deploy-a-thons and certainly in this part of the world, and it's been very big learning experience. And, and some of the folks in the region have been early adopters, like Mark has been at Seacom back in 2014 and discovered everything that was wrong. So it's just amazing how things have come so much further forwards. So moving on. So what tools do you have to let customers know that they're sending invalids to you? Do you have any tools? Telephone?
Relying on the customer, the call. So we went to a lot of effort when we were rolling ROV out for the first time, contact customers, public announcements, etc., that this was getting done. Checking individual sessions around what invalids are coming. Hey, we want to turn this on. You've got 2, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, depending on the customer. Can you go get this sorted out? Since there is no tools, we've put a lot of effort into training the front of house staff for when those calls come in so that we can actually point them to their registries, and show them straight away, hey, this is an invalid rower. These are the reasons why. You may need to go get someone to actually change whether or not incorrect marks length or whether or not you can even be advertising someone else's prefix. So yeah, no tools at the moment.
When I'll say for us, our kind of earliest experience with that was when in the US, a big moment was when AT&T, which is a similar type of, mostly access and enterprise type of network, similar to us, enabled validation for non-transit interconnects in, I think, early 2019. And so that applied to our sessions, for instance. And so one of our customers noticed that they were having a problem, and they were a BGP customer of ours, and they had their own address space. And they actually, so the problem was that they had issued a ROA for /23, but they were advertising 2/24s V4, of course. And so, all that was needed was for us to point out, oh, this is the problem, and it's all within your kind of realm to, all within your authority to fix. Either you can fix the routing to match the ROA, or you can fix the ROA to match the routing. Here's the documentation. Obviously, they were somewhat familiar since they'd issued a ROA, and it's up to them. And that's kind of a nice thing about the whole system, is that people can control their own destiny. I mean, that's, I think, something we're looking forward to, instead of, it's kind of arcane IRR, RPSL, route objects and stuff where, there's proxy registrations and all this stuff. But if somebody has a address assignment from an RIR, and then they run BGP, it's all within their own control, and it's kind of nice to have it that way. And then we rely on the documentation from the RIRs to tell people what to do, which is, generally quite well written. So that's it's not a tool, right? So getting back to, are there tools to let people know? No, there aren't. Similar to maybe what Dwayne was saying, that so because the RPKI deployment has been in the US anyway, relatively late, a lot of people at least understand what might go wrong. And the other thing is, it's because some other networks have done it even before we have, some of the large networks. I don't feel the burden is necessarily on us to notify people because they're dropping traffic in AT&T, which is another network, but we can help work with them and say, oh, it seems like this is what your problem is, but it hasn't come up very much, very occasionally.
Mark, what about you? I mean, what mechanisms does Seacom have for informing customers that they're sending invalids?
Yeah, my fiber's back, so this should be better. So I think, like everybody else, tools for this one, not so much. So we didn't advise customers that we're going to do this because we figured it would just be creating too many questions. But what we did do is we did train the staff and the NOC to have RPKI state checks as the first step in a connectivity issue, because you could go around in circles trying to look for a problem, and it's just that.
He spoke too soon, didn't he? His fiber's gone again. So while we wait for Mark to return, Dwayne or Tony, I mean, before we go on to our final discussion topic, the folks on this panel watching this webinar, this panel discussion, who are probably thinking about deploying ROV, they've signed the ROAs and all the rest, they're still thinking about ROV, and even though the big names have all done it, they're still thinking and waiting and watching. What would you recommend for them to do? Go ahead, deploy, wait a little bit longer, for what in particular? What would your advice be?
Go ahead and deploy. It's actually not as scary as what we originally thought it was going to be. We were expecting a whole mismatch, a whole heap of invalids, a whole heap of customers coming back going, and it was nowhere near as bad as what was expected. A lot of that is just due to the way the structure of valid, invalid, and unknown actually works. And we were lucky enough here in Australia that when we deployed, I don't think we had a huge population of ROAs signed. So there was less of an impact. And as they've gone and signed them, it's more of a recent thing. So I'm expecting another, say, 12 months as the ROAs become a bit more used, people do a bit more aggregation, things change and not get updated. I'm waiting for about another 12 months to see how that goes and what the impacts are associated with it. I'm expecting very small, but there could be a few key ones around the place where people just get lazy.
Tony, you would recommend people to go deploy ROV now?
Yeah, I think it's definitely mature. Check with your router vendors to make sure you're running, I mean, at this point, I think they should be ready to tell you recommended, code revision that would support it. So check on that, but also an incremental rollout, I think, makes it, to Dwayne's point, less scary to say, okay, we're going to implement it, get the policies written and implement it on a kind of neighbor by neighbor basis so that you can, back out of it incrementally if you need to, or if, one particular thing is causing a problem, you don't have to sort of flip the switch entirely on or off. One other thing I'd say is when you figure out, when you're writing the policies and figuring out how to integrate the validation check into the policy, depending on how complicated the policy is, you might just want to think about where you do that, because for us, for instance, for some customers, we support a remote triggered black hole community where they send like a /32, kind of a host level address, and it triggers a black holing if they're under a DOS attack or something on our side. And since that /32 definitely there won't be a ROA for that, you'll want to have that clause. If you're doing something like that, supporting that kind of feature, that clause needs to come before the for the validation check, because otherwise you'll just drop that that host route. So something to think about.
All right. And Mark, before you got interrupted again by the wonderful network that we've all built, do you want to finish off with talking about the tools for customer notifications, and then just your thoughts about, the folks here who are watching this webinar? I mean, would you advise them to go deploy ROV, or should they wait around a little bit longer, or what?
Yeah, so like I was saying, we relied on the tools, the visibility tools that were provided by the validators, and I think one of the best ones that was actually Ripe, oddly enough. So it's a bit of a shame that they aren't in the game anymore. Routinator also provided a nice front end that can, give you some good visibility, but they also provide some other backends as well, like Fort and so forth. So those is where we relied upon a lot. Then also our internal looking glass, we have a website for it. I think Philip, you've used it before. And on the looking glass, we do allow you to check if a route is valid, invalid, or not found. So that's one area where we can either have customers have a look, everybody else have a look, or even the NOC have a look. But yeah, otherwise, again, we rely sometimes on customers calling in with problems. I think I got an email from Netflix 2 days ago saying one of their eyeballs on our network had been marked as invalid, and it was a misorigination between them and their cloud provider. So we rely on those things. So no specific tool yet at the moment, just a combination of all that. But then, yeah, I definitely recommend. I think there's enough maturity out there right now, both on the equipment vendor side, as well as the relying party software. It does make sense to do it now, and there's a lot more participation globally. So I think you're going to get quite a significant amount of coverage by doing it now. And yeah, I mean, just look out again for the Cisco iOS XE issues. Those ones are still present. They haven't yet been fixed, 8 almost, I don't know how many years later. So be careful with that. But the rest of the vendors I've found seem to be okay in that respect. But yeah, I think it's reasonably mature enough now to do. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. That's great advice. Thank you, Mark. So we've got one question from Roland Dobbins for all of you. What measures are operators taking to ensure that the publication points are protected from DDoS attacks and other types of threats? Who wants to take that one first?
I guess I can. I mean, so publication point for us, that that publication is for when you're issuing ROAs, and we're mostly talking about ROV so far in this, but depending, you can do it in one of two models. As I think so earlier in the week, we discussed the delegated model, where you run your own certificate authority and then publish the results, or in the in the hosted model, where the RIR will do those things for you. And I think, as they mentioned, the RIRs, a couple of the RIRs are offering a hosted publication where they'll allow you, they'll take the results from your CA and host the publication themselves. And then for some of the other RIRs are looking at that feature, which if we went to delegated, we would make use of that, I expect. So, right, we don't have our own publication point too. So I don't know if other people might on this call. I'm not sure if anyone's using hosted. I mean, delegated rather.
Yeah, so we decided as well to go a hosted solution and just using the RIR stuff. That's another one that leads into the next question of what's next for us, and that is looking at delegated. But yeah, so from a publication point, we don't have one, so there was no need to actually put any controls and etc. in. From a relaying party software, it's all hidden away in a management segment, so again, not exposed to the wider internet from an attack perspective.
Yeah, I mean, same for us as well. I mean, we
How long should I pause waiting for Mark to return?
Well, I guess I'll vamp a bit and say, you know, obviously, if in the hosted model, and I don't know how diverse the, you know, if the cloud, the RIRs are getting more savvy with, say, doing a cloud, you know, CDN type of publication model where there's multiple instances serving the same data globally, that would be good. But I guess at least we have the cold comfort of if it is a problem for a given IRR, like, you know, for us, most of it is Aaron. If somebody DDoSes Aaron's publication point, it's going to take away all our ROAs from world visibility, but the fail open model is, you know, helps us to think about, you know, the risk being manageable.
All right, so see if he's returning. So Mark is returning. Is he returning? He's had time to think while his internet has recovered. Wish to say anything more about what you were saying before you were interrupted?
I can't believe. No, I was just saying that we haven't had a chance to think about Roland's question, because we haven't considered, like I was saying, the delegated model in any serious form, really.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So that brings us really to the final discussion point. So we can start a little bit of sky or stargazing, I suppose. What's next for RPKI?
Path validation. I think that's the next thing, whenever that will be. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more development on the relying party software side. I think there's going to be a bit of interest on the CA side. I'm not so sure how practical that will be, but I think every operator will have a different reason for thinking about it. But I think the path validation bit now is way overdue. Yeah.
Yeah, to add to Mark's conversation there, that is the biggest question that we get asked around any of this. When is path validation coming? When are we going to be able to actually not just do origin, but be able to actually look at path validation?
Right. The risk, the big risk that, I mean, aside from origin being, you know, potentially spoofable, the bigger risk, you know, that's generally like a malicious actor, you know, you have to take some steps to do that. But the bigger risk that we see is route leaks, and ROV doesn't do much of anything for that. So, right, it would be the path validation, or ASPA is the, which I'm trying to remember what it stands for, is the proposal in the IETF that's being discussed to do, you know, as a step toward a validation of path, or you know, provider relationships, so that route leaks become less likely. So that is the thing that we're hoping for.
All right, so we've got one more question from the attendees. This is from Achi Atienza. If Octo RPKI is not maintained, should we discourage operators from using it?
I would say that, I mean, Mark showed that page before, sorry to cut you off, but you know, that's helpful for you to understand. I think it's worth understanding about the software ecosystem. And, you know, at a point, we went from 1 or 2 relying party software packages, and it bubbled up, you know, swelled to maybe as much as 7, but then there's been a bit of a contraction again as people have moved around. So it's a good question, and, you know, worth monitoring. I would at this point maybe discourage people from that, but Cloudflare is trying to pick it up again. We'll see. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I think same. Just to echo Tony, I think it's worth monitoring. I think we kept running the ripe one for longer than we should have. But yeah, I mean, the solution here is one of security that we are trying to fix. So if the application isn't being figure out exactly why we're struggling with relying party software and the momentum to keep it going, you know, something starts and stops, and something else comes up and stops, and then something else comes up and stops. So I'm really trying to figure out why we are struggling to maintain momentum with a lot of these projects, and why we can't enjoy, you know, the same momentum like, you know, Apache, for example, you know, has, or, you know, MySQL or whatever. So I think that's something that we need to think about as a community, is how do we, even if we just settle on 1 or 2 or 3, how do we at least give them the momentum to keep going, so we're not switching, you know, software every 5 years, if you may.
All right. Dwayne, do you have any comments about Octo RPKI?
I can only echo what the other guys are saying, is basically monitor it, deploy what is suitable for you. As Mark said, we've ran software in the past that's potentially beyond its lifespan because it still suits your environment. So yeah, watch this space.
So I have another question from the attendees. It's coming in through WhatsApp rather than through the chat, which seems to have frozen for some reason. Any recommendation or advice on how to persuade management to push ahead with ROV? I mean, if the tech team is all convinced, how do you persuade the people who pay the bills?
Do they need to know? I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, so at least from our side, we didn't have to, because it's such a deeply technical problem that doesn't necessarily have an ongoing issue that, you know, brings it to the fore. So we didn't have to explain to them. I suppose the only reason you might want to get management buy-in is if you need new hardware that supports RPKI. Maybe the others can give the examples if they had to do that, but short of incompatible hardware, I would just not tell them.
I'd say that wasn't, maybe I privately considered that, but I felt it was probably less risky for me personally to let them know. And for us, you know, as time went on, I mean, because I'd been involved with the development of routing, you know, improvements to routing security for quite a while. And so it was a matter of kind of building up the, you know, discussion with management that this is important and why it's important. And then as, you know, different press things came out, mostly just in trade, you know, trade press, you know, if there's a routing security incident, route leak or what have you, that, I mean, we've definitely had things that have caused adverse effects to us. So at times, kind of trying to reinforce with them, okay, this is, improving routing security is important. This is why. And then RPKI ROV is, can be a step to that. And, it ended up getting more of their mind share, if you will, from the trade press or, different inquiries they got about, oh, is that something that you guys are doing, and what's the plan for it? So I was able to step in as they started to get more interested and say, yes, we have the plan, here it is. And, it was, it ended up being manageable by the time we got to do it.
Yeah, so for us, trying to convince management in the early days was a fairly hard task. A lot of stuff is, why are we implementing something that isn't going to really impact us? Sign your rowers and we're protected. Why do we need to protect and participate? So there was lots of conversations around the betterment of the wider internet, contributing to all of that. The big key for us to convince our management was to show them basically examples of the impact of what has occurred due to hijack, whether or not malicious or by config mistake or inadvertent stuff up, and then actually demonstrate, if we had this in place, these are what would be the lesser of impacts to our customers. And it was a slow process, and yeah, it was more of the demonstration of how do we make the network better and what was the actual benefit to our own network and our customers by implementing it.
Okay. So just to wrap up with, well, having been having this good, interesting discussion for the last hour or so, do you have any final thoughts, just as a final wrap up of the discussion?
Mine would be, don't do the BGP communities for RPKI conveyance. It seems to be quite a thing. Avoid it if you can. That would be my advice, because a lot of people seem to be really keen on that for some reason or other. But the way the RPKI system in the ISP runs right now, it scales very well. So you can have 2 or 3 servers running your validator, and you can have all of them talking to all your routers independently. So that would be my parting thought. Don't do it.
I would say, right, the communities thing might seem attractive at first, but I don't think there's that much benefit, especially at this point in the game. And the other thing I'd say is, remember that the signing, publishing ROAs and then doing ROV, doing the validation on the BGP sessions coming in, are 2 separate things, and they don't have to be, you don't have to do one first and then the other. They're entirely unrelated per se. So, just keep that in mind and do what makes sense for you, in the order that it makes sense, and it can be kind of specific to your situation. So.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add at the end of this is that if you are on the cusp of deploying ROV and you're thinking about it, go ahead and do it. It's not scary as what it is, as long as you've done your due diligence. Yeah, it's a benefit to the wider internet. And especially your own networks as well. So yeah, just go ahead and do it.
Great, thank you all very much. So thank you, Dwayne, Mark, and Tony, for the last hour, sharing all your experiences, war stories, and so forth, and your great advice during this webinar. So I hope the attendees who are watching now and who are watching in future on the recordings will benefit from everything that you've had to share in the last hour. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. And with that, I will hand back to our hosts at the Internet Society.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amrish, and glad to see you all. Hi, Mark. Hi, Phil. Good to see you here. It's question time. Unfortunately, you guys won't be able to vote. It's for the attendees only. And let me start the poll now. So we've kept the most difficult question for the last session, but I hope you will get it right. So the first question is, which statement is false about a resource certificate? It serves as an electronic proof that a resource has been assigned to an organization, or it contains a list of internet number resources, or it contains the name of the organization to which the resources have been assigned. A few more seconds. All right, we should end the poll now. Let me share the results. So yeah, the good response is that it does not contain the name of the organization to which the resources have been assigned. It just contains a reference but not the name of the organization. We move to the next question. There we go. So which types of files are not found in an RPKI repository? Is it the manifest file, the CRLs, or a plain text file of resource delegation? Good. 3 more seconds, and there we go. I end it now. Yeah, so we have, of course, in a repository manifest files, CRLs, and certificates, but we do not have a plain text file with resource delegation. Good job for those who responded well. Third and last question. So what is the purpose of a manifest file? Does it contain the public and private key pair? Does it contain a list of signed files in an RPKI repository, or it contains a list of revoke objects? Wow, only good responses coming in. Awesome. It contains a list of signed files in an RPKI repository. 100%, everyone got it right. So well done. Over to you, Aftab.
Thank you so much, Amrish. And I would just like to thank all the panelists and, of course, Dr. Philip for moderating this session. So that was it. On a Friday evening, late at night in the far land of Australia for myself, for Dr. Philip, and for Dwayne. But everybody else joining it on a Friday evening, morning, afternoon, whatever it is. Thank you so much for joining and listening to this conversation. We tried to bring everybody together to convince them to create ROAs for operators, of course, and for the IXPs as well, to help propagate the message. Please let us know how was the effort. You can reach out to us via Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, email, whatever you like. But on that note, I would say thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you again through some platform. Till then, have a good weekend. Take care of yourself and be safe. Thank you so much, everyone.